Hi, I'm Wild Bill. It's the 12th of March 2022, and I should be resting and taking it easy in case I have a sudden need to go out tonight and play piano like a pro. Instead, I am sitting at my PC, reading and listening and thinking, and this is what I've come up with. Understand first, I am no professional. I have no experience in the criminal justice system. I only understand the outer layer of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. However, I'm going to try a thought experiment with you guys today and see what you think. Prisoners. You're fighting a war. Perhaps you lose prisoners to the enemy. Perhaps you gain prisoners from the enemy. All right. Say, in the course of an advance, you take over some territory, and in the process you isolate and force the surrender of 500 enemy nationals. They're soldiers. You take their guns, and you take their ammunition, and you take their support material, you leave them their first aid. Now you have the trouble of what are you going to do with these 500 enemy? Well, you're going to need 2 men for each enemy soldier to guard them. That's the rule, I think. 2 guards for every enemy prisoner. And you're going to have to march them somewhere. That means you're going to take your men out of the line. 1,000 of your men are now going to go out of the line to march the enemy back to a processing center, where very slowly they're give their name, rank, and serial number. They're stamped with a number or given a shirt or something, right? Deloused, sprayed down, something. And then put in a fenced area, or if you're really lucky, a place that's got cabins, big long cabins for you to live in until they decide what's going on with you. Prisoners are often poorly fed, and that isn't necessarily the fault of the capturing country's forces. An army only has so much of a logistical tail. An army can only support X number of troops in the field, and it's struggling to do that. And if you suddenly add to that number in enemy troops coming in, captured, you can stress your logistical train to its maximum and it might break. This happened to Germany in World War II. Exact thing happened to Germany in World War II. The taking of 3.5 million Russian prisoners was no victory for the Reich, which was already strapped for food and the self-sufficiency, the autarky that their leader demanded and wrote about in his book. Taking 3.5 million enemy prisoners meant either you had to abide by the Geneva Accord and the Hague Conventions on the treatment of prisoners, and that's absolutely impossible. How are you going to house 3.5 million men? But wait, you can't even build defenses against their attacks. You don't have any wood. You don't have any concrete. How are you going to build? And you burned all the villages, and they burned all the villages, and everybody's burned all the villages. And the old Babas are like hiding in the brush somewhere, hoping they don't freeze to death before spring so they can eat a crocus and die. So it's difficult to support prisoners when you take them. They put a hole in your line because it's a big chunk of prisoners, however many you take, 10, 20, 30, 100, 200, 500. If you encircle a division, that division can only feed itself for a very short period of time. Those 15,000 men might all have to surrender, despite their guns and bombs. They run out of food. So you can take a large number of prisoners at once, and especially if you're successful. What if you just rave through the enemy because your generals are the best ever, and your weapons are the best ever, and your people are the most highly motivated, and your cause is just and good for invading another enemy, invading another sovereign nation because of political differences. So my solution, say the United States of America gets into a war with somebody, Russia, People's Republic of China, Zaire, perhaps with India over that mess at the top of the world between the Chinese and the Indians. Perhaps we step in somewhere to act as the world's policeman where we are not as appreciated as we expected to be, and where our power is very tenuous, and we have a hell of a time projecting it, like Afghanistan. One of the most inhospitable places, I think, on earth to support a military is Afghanistan. Inhospitable in that against a hostile populace, you spend, I'll bet, double, maybe triple what you expected to spend, and plus you're having to always deal with casualties and prisoners. Those prisoners interrupt your line. Those prisoners interrupt your officer's way of thinking. They're like, what am I going to do with the prisoners, instead of saying, how am I going to counter that mortar? This is important stuff. In many wars, prisoners just sat there until somebody decided what to do with them, and then they either fed you and marched you to an internment area or they killed you. World War II showed the difficulty of killing large numbers of people, and so they were left to starve to death. That's being worked to death and starved to death. That's about how monkeys interpret civilization. So if you were like that, if you promoted that as an official policy in your government, you're a monkey. You're not a human being. That's all I have to say about that. Go right ahead and argue with me all you want. I may not understand monkey talk. So here's what you do with your prisoners. I have to jiggle my mouse so I don't lose my game. Here's what you do with your prisoners. In my opinion, mind you, and as I stated earlier, I am no expert. But here is what I think we should do with all prisoners. The United States takes a large number of enemy troops. Say we outmaneuver the Mexican Liberation Front that has come to take California back where it belongs. And if we think about it, we might not be against that. Just consider. Let Mexico supply the water. Anyway, and we have a battle against them, let's say, and we use our military might and our command of the air and a variety of superlative technologies and dovetailed force capabilities to entirely encircle a Mexican army, 42,000 men, guns, tanks, missiles, and they're running out of food, and they're like forced to surrender. They can't break through us and get back to their lines. So we take, let's say, 50,000 men. That's an easy number, right? So now we might have 100,000 men on the line, maybe 200,000 men. Maybe we have marshaled our entire army and we're going forward against these Mexican terrorists or whatever they are. So, and we isolate an entire army and force it because it's starving to death, of course, and has no medical services. It all gets burned out quickly. It gets no mail, has no condoms, whatever. Your socks are all dirty. Well, now what? Right? No more hot food, then no more food. Then you've eaten your horses, now your officers are looking at you and putting on their bib. So you surrender. Then the United States takes you as prisoners. Well, the United States can only support so many men. It's got 200,000 men in the line already. And it's got all the highways full of trucks going back and forth from the front and bringing all the food and all the ammunition and all the medical supplies and all the machine replacements and all the replacement parts and all the trained personnel and all the sick away and windowed away, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, strapped to the max. And now you're going to put prisoners on those valuable trucks that you need to support your troops, and you're going to truck them back to the back. And the officers that should deal with you are now thinking about how are we going to feed these prisoners. So they call you and they go, listen, we're going to take a third of your ration today because we've got to feed prisoners. And you're like, oh, that's perfectly, wait, what? So that doesn't work. Taking prisoners doesn't work. Abusing prisoners is even worse because then you send a message that can't be unsent. Prisoners can do things to your army that you would not believe they could do. Perfectly ordinary, good people that believe in kindness and good and virtue can become murderers, forced to dehumanize the enemy in order to deal with him in a gross and brutal arena. So that dehumanization is a terrible thing for anybody, for the guards and for the prisoners both. The prisoners suffer, But the guards are traumatized too, and that goes home and goes to their children and their wives and their husbands. Right? They're bullshitting buddies. So, my idea is this. You take prisoners, you assemble them in a column, you give the front guys a white flag, and you give them each man, each prisoner, you give them a cigarette, and you give them a Hershey bar. And then you pat the last guy on the butt, and they all march back to the enemy lines. That's right. That's right. And like any army, you're already employing what's called maskirovka. You're already hiding your intentions from the enemy. You don't make the enemy prisoners know your positions. This is something you couldn't do anyway, even if you weren't employing my idea. You'd never want to let them know what your positions are. That's the problem with taking prisoners, right? Because they're looking. So you make it so you take prisoners, you put them in a formation area, and you say, here's a Hershey bar and a cigarette for each one of you guys. You disarm them. And here's a Hershey bar and a cigarette. And there's your front lines. Here's a white flag. We'll call your troops on the phone and tell them, hey, we're sending your prisoners back. That sends two messages at once. And it does us a huge benefit as well. The two messages are, we send a message to their officers that we're not going to play the game at their level. That we're going to take the moral and ethical high ground. We're that good at it that we can carry it. And we also set a standard, because if they can't do that, how's that make them look? Yeah, that's what I mean. We do that because it somehow mildly inclines them to perhaps want to treat our prisoners well, too. There's a thing called role modeling that people that defend violent video games conveniently ignore. And that role modeling is a positive thing. If you have negative role models, you have a tendency to make negative decisions when you come to those partings of the ways in the development of your character, because you've seen the role models do it. You can also be the kind of person that understands a very advanced concept called negative role models. My dad gets drunk and he beats my mother, I'll never have a drink. My mother gets drunk and she beats my dad, I'm going to ask her to teach me to defend myself against the bullies in school. Whatever, however you decide to make it work. Those are strategies, but in general, people go with role models. You see the people around you doing a certain thing, wearing a certain fashion, right? As a detective from the Los Angeles Police Department, Junior Division, told me on the plane one time. He says, first you put on the fashion and the jargon, the words, the style of speaking, and then you put on the behaviors. That was his way of putting it. And of course, he's a biased observer, but he had extensive experience with youths that had fallen to those traps, that had heard violent music and violent concepts being available in the media, and had hung with other guys that liked that and thought that was cool. And they all, as a group, began to feel that way. And the media, had merch. You wear the merch, now we're all together, right? You can talk the talk because the media is teaching you how to talk the talk, because they get real guys from the street, right, to do the talk. And, listen to the music, you're wearing the clothes, you're talking the talk. Some people cross the line. They become the person that they're acting like. They turn it into reality TV. That's called negative role modeling. Some people understand it, some people don't. I'm not going to try to teach it to anybody. I'm not that good with it. I'm closest to being a negative role model. Kids, don't be like me. Artists embrace the ideas that I convey to you because my ideas are whole and solid, even if my soul is broken. So you give each of the prisoners a cigarette and a Hershey bar. You let them file out from your front lines straight across the open, right to the enemy lines. And they're going to want to go right, unless it's like, unless they're being driven by their intelligence apparatus. Go or we'll kill you. And then it's not your fault, is it? No, you're being the good guy. You're being the good guy. Wait. You could be the good guy to the part if your enemy is starving, if we were engaged in Somalia or parts of Ethiopia, where there are large organized terrorist-style armies that rob and rape and pillage, and they're being supported by foreign money. If we went in to clean some of that stuff out, then if we took prisoners among those people, we'd want to give them rations too. Everybody gets an MRE. Sorry you don't like that. Who else is giving you food today? Yeah. And since MREs have infinite life duration, you can just give them whichever ones you got at the bottom. Ham and MFers. Here, you can have these because I don't like them. So anyway, each prisoner gets a cigarette and a chocolate. If you're in a place that's so economically strapped that the soldiers themselves are starving, that's part of why they're doing what they're doing, then you feed them if you can. Once. You don't take prisoners. You don't build re-education camps. You send them back to their people. And pretty soon they and their people are not going to see eye to eye. And when a people doesn't see eye to eye with its rulership, that rulership loses its enfranchisement. That opposing force goes into chaos, free fall. And you have won. You just wait for their armies to go to ground, and then you very carefully pick up the pieces, feed all the people that you meet that survived that horror at least once. And then withdraw. Your job done. Nobody ever was afraid of an American. Nobody was ever held in terror of what would happen when the evil colonizers take over. This is so simplistic that I'm guessing any of the wiser people among you are thinking, Bill, no way. This couldn't be that way. People aren't like that. We're mean, we're cruel, we're evil. Is that what you're thinking? Wouldn't you in other situations be telling me, no, Bill, don't say that other thing because people are nice and kind and wholesome? Now rethink your ideas and your convictions. The good guy is the guy that does good, not the guy with the better rhetoric. Jimi Hendrix and Jimmy Page. The one is not a better guitarist than the other because his press is better. It's because of the quality of the man. And the quality of your soldier is the quality of the manhood of your nation and its national impact on the international scene. And it is so incredibly important that to neglect it is to neglect your job. But the enemy, if the enemy loses a large number of men, it loses tactical presence, it may lose strategical relevance, but its logistical system is better able to feed those troops it has left and clothe and house and give medical supplies to. You lose 100,000 men, 50,000 men, remember I said? You lose 50,000 men. Well, now your home troops are like saying, phew, we don't have to feed that 50,000. All this extra stuff we moved up can be used for additional days of gas and oil and food and cigarettes and beer and whatever, and hookers, for your units at the front. That's going to ease our logistical trail, our logistical situation. But for the person that takes the prisoners, it's going to increase their logistical strain by a lot. And it's going to put a big hole in their lives because those troops take up a space. And if you put too much of your stuff too close to enemy troops and they escape, then they're like, yeah, over there you got a battalion of tanks, and over here about 15 miles, there was a fighter park. And so like I said before, you already have to be engaged in Maskarovka, so I'm not saying anything too simplistic. I'm saying you take the troops, you marshal them in a central area, which could be very easily done. You do it between battalion boundaries, right? Small numbers between company boundaries. These are the places where your men are most aware because they don't want to shoot friendlies. And you have them within shouting distance of each other, and then your enemy prisoners in the middle. They are disarmed, Easy to say, put down your weapons, move them about 100 yards down the road. One guy picks up all their weapons, your guy, right? Well, they're 100 yards down the road. And then you move them back. You say, drop any weapons that you remain because we don't want to have to shoot you for, for being a spy. And then maybe a few more weapons will get dropped and they'll walk back. You didn't cost them much, but you got their weapons. This is the important thing. And then you say, all right, everybody pass this guy. Here's a Hershey bar. Next guy, here's a cigarette, right? Hershey bar cigarette, Hershey bar cigarette. Any officers out there, you get a lighter. This is building camaraderie in the enemy prisoners. Experiences that they will all share afterward. At the bar, in their neighborhoods, with their children. Do you finally hear what I'm saying? Probably not. It's not your fault. It's my ideas are very radical. They're not human. The human idea is to put people that you don't like very close in a tiny little area until they do something stupid and then just brutalize because it's all their fault. That's the human thing. I'm not like that. I don't want to, that's what cities are all about. I don't want to be like that. I want to be the other kind. I want to be the Neanderthal that wants to live in peace with you guys. And how do you do that? You take enemy prisoners. They don't like you. They've been conditioned against you. They've been told that you eat babies and you inject LSD into their horse and they give that to you and they give that to their soldiers and the soldiers are all going crazy. It's all the Americans' fault. Okay, that's what their people are being told. There's scuttlebutt and rumors and, direct propaganda statements, right? The enemy is subhuman. You can do anything you want to him. That's been done, by the way. Okay. So, but when they come to you, they're angry and they're sad and they're half ready to commit suicide and half ready to do something really stupid and commit suicide by charging at you. And they don't really know what's going to happen. They're all scared to death. They're living in a constant state of anxiety. It's burning them out. It's destroying them from within. You don't think that's how prisoners are? Any of you guys out there been a prisoner? Wise up your friends. So, you don't do that to enemy prisoners. You don't let them disrupt your lines. You don't let them disrupt your situation, your logistics, any of that. You merely reform them up, and as they pass your desk, you give them a cigarette, and you give them a Hershey bar, and you put them under their own officer. He's got the lighter. They're going to follow him because they're going to want to smoke that cigarette. Right? And this is going to be a story they're all going to tell their grandchildren. This is going to be a story about how crazy those Americans are. We were fighting them tooth and nail. We were trying to kill them. And they turned the other frickin' cheek. How dare they? Okay? I don't expect people to get what I'm saying. Because it may be that what I'm saying is complete nonsense. And I'm giving it credence because it's my own idea. But what I base this on is a deep, deep research into the understanding of human character that I have done over the course of my life in an effort to be able to understand the oddities of my own character, which are considerable. So think about it at least, will you? Think about, instead of feeding the enemy prisoners, instead of putting guards against the enemy prisoners, instead of wasting all your effort on enemy soldiers that you don't have to waste on them, and instead of brutalizing them or starving them or them dying of disease because you just didn't get there in time or whatever, or you forgot, or something went wrong, instead of any of that, which their nation can use against you in the world court, you just send them back with a cigarette and a Hershey bar. Their nation has to rearm them, re-equip them, re-indoctrinate them. That's hugely expensive. And part of war is the economic stress that you place upon your enemy. Wild Bill.